Hello again, everybody. This is John and Glenn with BestPriceNutrition.com. Today we wanted to do a video to give you guys an idea of how we judge and rate supplements. I mean, it's nothing novel what we're doing. We do get a lot of questions and comments, and sometimes people are put off sometimes when we're very forward and skeptical of things. I think we apply informed skepticism to these supplements, and we're not going to shy away from that. But sometimes you guys haven't tried it. We get comments like that, which is ridiculous. But we'll address that. So we wanted to give you an idea of how we're judging and rating supplements, because you read them and
yeah, I mean it's the biggest thing for us is we want to inform our customers and the people out there who are taking these supplements and let them know what they can expect, and we use a science-based approach. We do look for research on these products.
Which there's a lack of in this industry. I mean, you read a lot of the marketing, and marketing's marketing. It is what it is, and we don't begrudge any company trying to sell a product. That's totally fine. We get it. But there's not really a lot of people out there cutting through the marketing saying, hey, here's what it does, or here's what really happened, because there's just not. And at some point, some of the marketing, it's embarrassing with the industry sometimes, and it's what gets the industry made fun of sometimes. Yeah. So that's really why we wanted to address this. Both of us have degrees in science, and that's kind of our background. So we like to inform that. And the thing with science, with any of these supplements, is that the debate is never over and it's never settled. We can only tell you what we can tell you based on the research up to that point. Now, if research comes out a month after we make a video that says something different than we did, then great, that's changed. So we can never say definitively this is always the case. But what we can say with a degree of certitude is that this is what has happened based on the research. These are the results, and here it is.
Yeah, I think oftentimes we look at supplements, and sometimes people may say, oh, you did a negative review of quite a few different products. And it's not that we don't want these supplements to be good or to work. We having dealing with supplements, we enjoy finding out that supplements are useful and that they do work in the body. But it's just a lot of times when you come across ingredients, you really have to cut through all that marketing and really look deep down into what exactly is it doing in the body. Has it ever been tested in humans? Does it work? Or is it all just, I guess you could call, bro science or hype? A lot of times people take a product and, oh, I got the best pump of my life, and this or that. Well, that could have been any number of things happening.
There's so many variables. You can't. I don't care who you are. You can't rely on that. And the thing is we sell supplements. So, at some point, some would say it's behoove you to say, oh, these supplements are great. This and that. But we don't look at it that way. We'd rather be honest and say, hey, here's what's good, here's what's bad, and then I think you build trust that way too. So that's really the point of this video, is to let you guys know what we're doing when we're judging these and we're rating them, and we look for research. Glenn, you touched on the fact that we look for human studies. If it was tested on a rat, that's fine and that's okay. Or a lot of things are based on theory, and they make sense in theory. Trust me, we look at Arginine, for instance.
Oh yeah.
In theory, it should absolutely increase nitric oxide production. It makes sense. It's just there's a pathway there, and boom, it should work. It hasn't, at least to this point, been proven to increase nitric oxide production. Because we do know that the human body has this homeostasis where it wants to maintain balance. Well, it has a counterreaction to it. It produces arginase, which inhibits the buildup of nitric oxide as a result of arginine. So that pathway is rate limiting.
So yeah, there's
in
a
theory,
lot of,
it makes sense, right?
A lot of ingredients that in theory should work, or reading the research, it should work, but it just doesn't. Your body has mechanisms to counteract these things.
Well, in theory, you should be able to just take testosterone. Well, steroids are not just testosterone. What makes them different. There's ethers and esters and different things bound to them to protect the testosterone or the other forms of testosterone in your body. You don't just it'll get broken down right when if you injected yourself with just test and it didn't have some kind of ether or ester or something bound to it, it would be broken down right at the injection site, and then boom, you got nothing. And we're not advocating that, but we're just giving that as another example of something that in theory would make sense. So we look for human studies. If it's done on a rat or something that's not really of interest, sometimes we'll read it just to see and mention it. But ultimately we'd like to see. Sometimes we'll say it's too early to tell, so we'd like to see some human studies. We'll check and see if the research is peer reviewed. Are there competing interests? Like I remember we did the one with Scivation where they funded the study.
Yeah, Scivation Extend. They funded the study themselves. So of course they're going to be looking for the best possible outcome for them.
So you design the study that way. And that's not to say that the research is bunk. It's just you have to know that going in, and you have to say, hey, well, here's what the competing interest was, because you have to know how the study was designed, because sometimes studies aren't designed well. What they're testing it against doesn't make sense. The control is no good. So And you also want to see repeated results. Like I think the aspartic acid, there was what, one human study?
Yeah, I mean, there's more and more coming out now, or there's more and more research.
At the time we did our video.
At the time we did our video, there was only one. So the nice thing about it is that there has been some changes since then, or some studies on humans since then, which is nice. And you know, so as these ingredients get brought to the market, hopefully more and more research is done in them with humans rather than, you know, just rats and animals.
Sure. Yeah. So we'll see more and more of that, and you know, we'll update as we go. And then sometimes there are times when you say we'll use the if you feel it criteria, and the exceptions to that rule are stimulants.
Yeah, stimulants, pretty much everybody's going to feel. Most times, I would say, unless you have an extremely high tolerance to them. I mean, there are some people who can take the strongest stimulant or fat burner on the market and just not feel anything, but then, you know, your tolerance is just really high.
Yeah, so that's something, and you could take it, you could feel it right away. So that's something we'll say, well, how to make it feel, you know, and that's how you assess, because some of that you have to rely upon taking it and some experience to assess how much you need, because as Glenn mentioned, some people are more or less tolerant to stimulants. Another example is like with a protein powder, you know, if you drink it, did you get gassy? You know, maybe you have some lactose intolerance, you know, and even then there's some variables there that may not be accounted for. So if you do it a few times, like sometimes the customer says, well, I took it once and it made me go to the bathroom. Well, try it again. Just make sure, see if maybe there was something else, because you can't just rely upon one thing. But we'll still entertain that idea, because that's, in those cases, it does make sense to use that personal experience as a logical reason. And
yeah, we look for personal experience from, I guess, multiple people. Some people may have one reaction and just you know, get the greatest response in the world to it, and then somebody else may not. So we sort of look across the board at what our feedback is from customers, or ourselves trying it, other employees.
With those specific examples, where, you know, did you get gassy? Did you, you know, things like that you could feel. Not, I took a protein and I didn't grow. Okay, well, I mean, based on what?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Did you measure? I mean, who measured? And that's just your results. We want to see repeated results, and you know, well, we have a lot of research to prove that creatine, for instance, works. You know, so that's you know, something else to consider. And you touched on something else too, is with what am I losing my train of thought here? Well, anyways, moving on. The examples that we're giving there, though, are times when we're going to say, hey, you know, feel it, okay, that's fine, we'll entertain it.
Oftentimes when we do a review of like a pre-workout supplement,
exactly.
we'll say, well, you know what, if it gives you more energy, makes you feel better for your workout, then it's doing its intended job, basically. Whereas there may be a bunch of ingredients inside there that are, you know, and each one of them claims to do something. If you took that supplement and it made you, you know, gave you a better workout, gave you some more energy, then that's a good basis to go on.
Yeah, and another thing too, and we encourage others to do research too, is check things out, is consider, you know, when you look at some of the magazines, they'll have research updates, and they just give you a summary of the research, but you don't know what the design of the study is or anything, so you don't really know, you know, this or that. So here's like an example. This is one recently from the Journal of the International Society of Sports Nutrition. It says, you know, in the headline, it says, no effect of short-term amino acid supplementation on variables related to skeletal muscle damage in 100-kilometer ultra runners, a randomized controlled trial. So if you peel away the layers, now if you just read that highlight and then they just gave you kind of the synopsis of the results, you'd say, oh, okay, well, geez, these essential amino acids didn't work for these runners. Well, if you peel it back and you look, I highlighted a few things here just to run through. These athletes ingested 12 tablets 1 hour before the start of the race, and then 4 tablets at each of the 17 aid stations. The runners took a total of 80 tablets in the pockets of their race clothing. In total, they ingested 52.5 grams of amino acids. 20 grams were branched-chain amino acids. During the run, they consumed food and fluids at aid stations ad libitum. At each aid station, they recorded their intake of nutrition and fluid. Due to manufacturers' concerns regarding the high calcium content of the placebo tablets, which in combination with an expected dehydration could be harmful for the renal function of the athletes, we had to resign from a placebo control. Thus, the athletes randomly assigned to the control group also consumed foods and fluids ad libitum, so basically at their own will or at their own leisure, and recorded their nutrient and fluid intake, but did not receive any placebo tablets. So
there's some flaws there. I mean, if you're allowed to, if you're intaking these amino acid tablets and then you're allowed to go to an aid station and get as much to eat or drink that you want, that's going to flaw the study, because the food they're taking could have carbohydrates, fats, and protein.
Well, and it's not just them; it was also the control. They could be eating protein and carbs and all kinds of food. They would be. I mean, there's not even a matter of if they were. And as we know, carbohydrates can activate the mTOR pathway. Other things can happen to stop muscles from being broken down to affect these markers that they were looking at. So if you're eating and drinking as much as you can, and one group's taking the tablets too, but they're also eating it, well, there's really just, I mean, that completely ruins the study. I mean, and then you look, and there was questionnaires of subjective feelings, you know, muscle soreness. They had to rate it. It's subjective. So, you know, how sore are you? Well, I mean, everybody has a different pain tolerance. I mean, that's why sometimes I feel for a doctor. Somebody comes in and, that's a 10, doc, and, you know, for somebody else it's a 3, you know. So that's completely subjective. So it's really difficult. Now, they did analyze blood samples, but again, the blood samples are going to be flawed because the other people, they were eating and drinking whatever they wanted. So, I mean, it's kind of like, you know, also the big thing that you'd want to know, too, just looking at this study, is to say, all right, well, they looked at these amino acids during this specific race, and they checked the blood markers. Well, also, you'd like to see how this will work over the long term, maybe training up to the race, you know, having people take the more protein or than the other group, you know, just the control group was not taking in as much protein. Well, I think we can hypothesize pretty well that the group not taking in as much protein would probably have a lot more muscle breakdown and muscle damage, you know. So, but if you read that headline and you just simply read the results, you know, and didn't get into the, you know, actual design of the study, you would never know that. And sometimes when you look at magazines and you see these research updates, all you're going to get is that little paragraph and that headline, and you're going to say, well, you know.
Yeah, you've got to be skeptical of it sometimes when you're reading these magazines. A lot of the time they don't have the space to put everything in there.
Yeah, it's not their fault.
It's not their fault. It's just, you know, they're trying to give you the information. But, you know, if you see something that sparks some interest like that would, because you're always being told, you know, the benefits of amino acids, go ahead and do some research.
Look up the study. They tell you right where it's at. Go check yourself if it's of interest. You know, you could always check yourself. It's not, you know, too difficult to read into these. So that's something else to consider. So the bottom line is that you want to be skeptical of things. You want to know, hey, show us. You know, you're from Missouri. You want to know. I mean, that if in fact the supplements work. The biggest thing that I have noticed since we've been doing these videos is that some people take this stuff really personally, and they get almost offended if they took a supplement that they thought was working for them, and then you tell them that all the research actually says no. It's like, well, don't be offended. I mean, heck, I'd be thankful and save you some money.
Yeah,
you know, so.
I mean, and you know what? If it works for you, by all means, continue to take it.
Yeah, if that criteria works for you, or hey, my buddy felt it, so it must work, and I'm going to do it too, then we're not here to tell you not to. We're just telling you how we judge things. So, so that's how we're going to look at things. So, yeah, so keep the comments coming. Like, again, we don't mind them. I mean, it's fine. It certainly helps. You know, we're glad people are watching the videos. It's just, you know, just try not to get offended about your supplements, I guess, if you're one of those who gets offended.
Yeah, I mean, we're just here to give you the research and present to you what has been, you know, up till now.
Calling us fat and skinny and saying things like that, like you guys work out. I mean, really, I mean, you know, I mean, I could do the video with my shirt off too if it makes you happy, but I mean, that's stupid. And a lot of the times when you go to the gym and you see the biggest guy and you ask him what he's doing, trust me, I've talked to some of them. I'm like, well, first of all, some of them are on drugs, which completely eliminates a lot of the effectiveness of this. Not the effectiveness, but is going to skew the results. But also, some people are just gifted. They're going to get away with a lot of stuff that others won't get away with, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right. You know, it's just not the case. So you have to consider that as well. So. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, supplements is our business, and we like to, you know, do as much research as we can. We take supplements. We do work out. Maybe not follow the bodybuilding guidelines.
Yeah, I do CrossFit. I mean, I don't know.
I run. I do CrossFit. Things like that. I was a college football player. So
yeah, we all do different things. You know, everyone has different interests. Some people aren't I'm not trying to be a bodybuilder. I compete in grappling. That's my fun. That's what I like to do. So, anyways, that's all aside. That doesn't matter. It's, you know. You guys can still make fun of us. That makes you
we'll take it.
I mean, it really doesn't bother me that much. It's more humorous than anything. But that's, you know, oh yeah, you're skinny. What are you talking about? You guys even take this stuff? You know, so that's, you know, whatever. But anyways, just want to do this video, let you guys know how we judge these things. So if you have any questions, please post them in the blog or in the comments section of the video. Also, you can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/BestPriceNutrition. Thank you.
Thank you.